Look around. They're everywhere, and they're not the simple old power lines you might imagine. Instead, they're the visible part of the mostly unseeable information superhighway. It connects businesses and governments across borders, across the globe, sharing the most precious commodity, information. But the information highway is also invading our homes, tapping into our personal lives. Often without even realizing it, we're all plugged in. Phones, fax machines, and home computers, they all make our lives simpler and more convenient. But we're finding out that they also leave a hidden electronic trail, seemingly obscure, except in the hands of today's supercomputers. They can and do build dossiers and secret files on us that threaten our most cherished freedoms. Are we entering a brave new world, or could this be our final warning?
Who would have dreamed 30 or 40 years ago that every move that we make could be observed by satellite? Who would have thought that our telephone lines could be tapped without someone actually coming into our homes and tapping them?
People are being monitored through computers, through scanners, through videos. We are becoming very controlled.
There were people who remember Nazi Germany. There were people who remember apartheid in South Africa. They remember what it's like to have to carry papers. They remember what it's like to have to identify yourself on the street, what it's like to be marked for a certain race or color, religion. And they worry that things might turn in this country.
If Big Brother, if the powers that be want to observe our every move, they can now do so.
We call it the information age, and ours is a generation of staggering technological advances, of changing lifestyles and conveniences. We shop with credit cards, bank and automated teller machines, and of course we can reach into our pocket, pick up a phone, and talk to almost anyone, almost anywhere on the earth. There's no doubt that these technologies do mark a watershed, a moment in time when nothing afterward will ever be the same. But what are the dangers? What are the risks? Who is monitoring us? Who is tracking us? And why?
Virtually everything about the individual, the time they do the purchase or transaction, what they bought, what they did with it, what and where they bought it. Any related information about that transaction is all tracked.
Lars Soderstrom is an executive with one of the world's largest international banks. He worries about privacy and freedom in the information age.
The average individual, whether they realize it or not, information about their whereabouts, how long they were, what they did, is available to the bank. That information they may not want anyone else to know, including their wife.
Today, anything that takes place electronically, whether that means electronic banking, using a credit card, or making a phone call, creates an irrevocable permanent record. Put them all together, and you can create a complete profile on just about anyone. Privacy expert Jan Laurie Goldman warns that the power this places in the hands of those with access to these records is alarming.
There is information that is created about you, that is created in databases, stored in databases all over the world, and will be maintained there. You can store information electronically for a very, very, very long time. It's cheap, it's easy. So you essentially create an electronic web of information that is like a dossier, that is like a biography, pieces of information that are all over, that can be pulled together essentially with a push of a button.
Just one example of this new threat to our freedoms comes from the shadowy corners of the IRS. The increasingly secretive federal agency is now in the process of an $8 billion upgrade on a secret taxpayer database of information on virtually every American. According to one investigative report, the IRS intends to match and compare tax returns with consumer information contained in computerized databases developed by federal, state, and local governments and the private sector. But it's not only what we do that is recorded. Where we go is also becoming a part of our data shadow. Some of this tracking is indirect. For example, airlines and travel agents are currently embroiled in debate over who owns the records of our travel habits. But some of the tracking and monitoring of our activities is much more direct. The implications of the emerging toll booth technologies alone are cause for serious concern. In the name of speeding up crowded highways, sophisticated toll booths now can read microchips in speeding cars and deduct the toll from the person's account. There is no question that it is convenient. But do we want shadowy organizations and agencies with access to centralized databases to know where we were and when? But surveillance-capable toll booths are only the beginning. Many of our cars are already being fitted with anti-theft devices that allow the cars to be tracked by satellite, and even the highways themselves are being computerized.
One thing which is on the horizon is something that is called intelligent transportation systems. Cars will be equipped with a computer device. Tolls, bridges, there will be mechanisms along the highway to track your movements. They will record your license number. They will make sure that your registration is up to date. They will make sure that you are not wanted for any tickets that you might owe. So that all of this will be monitored electronically, and they can monitor your activities.
Welcome to the beautiful state of Virginia. We hope your stay with us is a pleasant one. For information on local community events, press 1.
We can all be tracked. There's no doubt about it. No one is even attempting to deny it. And many would be surprised to learn that there are virtually no laws to protect us. So, we're all being tracked, the innocent and the guilty alike. But who decides if you're guilty or innocent? And if you're deemed to be a threat to security, what happens when the awesome surveillance technologies of Big Brother government are directed at you? Few people realize just how sophisticated the technology has become. Let's just take one example. Our telephone. It may surprise you to learn that today, right now, governments can and do monitor every single phone and fax communication on the planet. In the name of tracking terrorists and capturing dangerous drug lords, secretive federal agencies have focused next-generation supercomputers and sophisticated listening devices on an unsuspecting population.
The movie Clear and Present Danger was based on the Tom Clancy novel about American efforts to break the Colombian drug cartels. Insiders agree that Clancy's novels are never products solely of his imagination. Instead, he uses his fictional accounts to detail the realities of technology and power and surveillance capabilities in the 1990s.
Give me the phone.
Rojas.
Did you do this thing?
Did I do this thing? Are you calling to ask me if I did this thing? You don't consult with us. You put us in danger. And now you have the arrogance to want me to believe that it wasn't you?
It wasn't, Enrique.
You have invited the Americans to retaliate against all of us.
I swear, I had nothing to do with it. Nothing!
Why do you expect me to listen to you when you're lying to me? Goodbye, Ernest.
No. Don't hang up. May we please have a meeting tomorrow night?
Tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you.
He's Cuban. 35 to 45. Educated in the United States. Eastern United States. That's the voice. Same voice.
You're sure?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
90%.
What most people do not realize is that Clancy's seemingly fictional account is actually based on the very real events surrounding the surveillance netcast for and the finding of Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar. Escobar had been in hiding for several years.
And then all of a sudden, he used his telephone, a modular telephone, And because of our advanced technology, they were able to unscramble his voice print by using very high technology. When you do this, they look at the voice characteristic, and what they can do with the voice characteristic, they can tie it back to a data bank where they have people's voices on the database, and very quickly they can match the characteristics up, and that's what happened with him.
However, a former senior military officer with the NATO government, this man who spoke with us only on the condition of anonymity, says that today it may not only be the voices of drug dealers or international terrorists that are kept on file.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if my voice is in there, your voice, and other people's voices.
However, voice recognition was only one part of the technology involved in the tracking of Escobar. The far more troublesome concern was the ability of sophisticated equipment to listen in on the millions of simultaneous calls taking place all over South and Central America during the search for the cartel leader. How widespread are such practices?
The National Security Agency, the largest Western intelligence organization, has denied that it can listen to all phone calls and radio messages. However, highly placed intelligence specialists trained by the NSA itself have confirmed this practice. One of these agents, Mike Frost, an operative within the Canadian Communication Security Establishment, the CSE, has gone public in admitting that he was trained to install sophisticated listening devices on the roofs of United States embassies and other sites worldwide. However, Frost goes even further than that. He confirmed that he had installed these devices in many national capitals to monitor communications and phone calls worldwide.
More recent investigations have found the code names for several of these covert operations. In North America, the NSA phone surveillance program is codenamed Oratory. At the same time in Britain, the BBC has uncovered the MI6's project codenamed the Dictionary Program. Cray supercomputers monitor millions of calls simultaneously. They are listening for the use of any one of 400 keywords that have been programmed into the system.
So I have to write him another note this week. That's the third one. Sarah, you can't imagine the grief that boy is causing me. What I worry about is him failing the entire year. I guess not. At least not as much as Clinton did last night with that speech from the White House. I could not believe what I was hearing. Listen, Sarah, I gotta go pick up the kids from school. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, Sarah. Thanks.
Whenever the computers pick up a targeted sequence of words, a tape is generated for intelligence specialists to review in their search for drug dealers or terrorists.
I'll write him another note this week. That's the third one. Sarah, you can't imagine the grief that boy is causing me. What I worry about is him failing the entire year.
He can't bomb out as badly as our Bradley did when he was in grade 9.
I guess not. At least not as much as Clinton did last night with that speech from the White House. I could not believe.
While the argument can be made that this technology is necessary to capture drug dealers and terrorists, many are asking how this affects personal freedoms and liberties. They also ask if these issues are red herrings designed to achieve a far more troubling objective, the monitoring of everyday citizens.
And yet they use these terrorist activities to go to Congress and to say, we need more authority to get access to credit records. We need more authority to get access to hotel records or to other financial information. We want easier access for wiretapping. We don't want to have to comply with the Fourth Amendment.
Jan Laurie Goldman is the Deputy Director of the Center for Democracy and Technology in Washington, D.C. She says that the big stumbling block is still the Constitution.
It's a burden. It's difficult. It gets in the way. Well, that's what the Constitution does. It gets in the way of the government intruding upon individual liberties.
America was shaken once again not too long ago when a CIA agent and his wife were found selling state secrets to Russia. What was almost unimaginable was the way that the authorities were finally able to track Richard Ames down. You see, one of the things that few people realize is that the electrical system in their home can also carry data. In other words, it can do the same things a phone line can. In fact, readily available technology now allows you to turn any outlet in your home into a phone jack.
What the FBI was able to do was wait until Ames would leave the house or go to bed. Then, from a van down the street, they were able to send an electronic signal through the electrical system of Ames' house and actually flip on his home computer. Call up the internally stored files and transmit them either by modem or electrical power lines to the FBI's waiting machines. Then, when they were done, they simply sent a signal through the power lines and flipped the computer off. Ames had no way to know they were ever there. The same way, we would have no idea if someone did the same thing with our home or office computer.
How tight is the web of surveillance of the government on the activities of the average citizen? How efficiently can the government actually monitor the actions of every one of us? Is the government able to track and monitor our phone calls and all activities? Well, I'm a Canadian, and here I stand just inside the United States border. A few hours ago, I crossed the Canadian border into the United States with my car. Obviously, Customs knows that my car is in the United States because they optically scanned the license plate. But aside from knowing my car is here, what else do they know? The fact of the matter is, that is the extent of their knowledge of my activities or where I'm going. Let's say that an illegal immigrant wanted to stay here in the United States and obtain a job. It would be illegal, of course, but there's no good system today to ensure that he could not get a job in this country. If he presented a false Social Security number, something that's relatively easy to do, most employers would never know the difference. This little example just illustrates the massive holes that exist today in the security data net. There is just no way to verify who a person really is.
But all of that is beginning to change. Within the government and the legislative circles, there are whispers that we are about to see the introduction of a long-feared American national ID card.
And initially, there was talk about a national ID to stem illegal immigration. If everyone in this country who is legally authorized to work and is a U.S. citizen has to carry a card, we can quickly weed out those people who are not authorized to work.
Have your credentials with you, please? Thank you.
So people like Senator Simpson have been calling for a national ID card or a national identification system as a way to prevent illegal immigrants from getting jobs. Now we have seen even greater force given to that argument because this is a very popular issue right now, trying to keep illegal immigrants out of the workforce.
In reality, however, the issue of illegal workers is a very small problem. What makes it a big issue is the emotion attached to it. The concern in privacy circles is that the emotion surrounding the issue is being deliberately manipulated to lure this country into accepting something they would never have considered before. And then, what comes in under the guise of a worker registration card will evolve into the full-scale national ID card that was envisioned all along.
Everybody always says, well, we'll only use it for this purpose, we won't use it for anything else. And the history in the United States of any kind of database of information or identifying number is that at the beginning it's promised to be used only for one purpose.
A Yale-educated lawyer, for 17 years, Bob Gelman was the counsel to the Congressional Subcommittee dealing with, among other things, information and justice.
Social Security number is the classic. If you go back and find one of the original Social Security cards, for many years it said on it, only for Social Security purposes, not for identification. And then they came along and said, well, you know, if we could use this for tax purposes as a tax ID number, it'll save a lot of money and prevent a lot of fraud. And so they started to do that, and that was really the first step, because anyone who pays wages or interest or dividends had to report it using the Social Security number. And then the welfare people came along and said, if we could use Social Security numbers to control welfare, we can avoid all kinds of fraud.
Are we moving to a system that will replace the Social Security card? Many insiders say it is only a matter of time.
This healthcare security card will offer this package of benefits in a way that can never be taken away. So let us agree on this, whatever else we disagree on. Before this Congress finishes its work next year, you will pass and I will sign legislation to guarantee this security to every citizen of this country.
Whenever there's been a call for a national ID card, the proponents always say, we just want to use it in this limited context. We just want to use the identifier or the card in this limited context. For instance, the card that the president was waving, we're only going to use that in the health context. Any other use will be illegal. I think it's pretty easy to imagine a health security card becoming a national identifier. If, as its proponents say, a health security card would have to be unique to the individual and would have to be tamper-proof or tamper-resistant, maybe have a magnetic stripe, maybe have a biometric identifier, that is going to be really tempting to use it for other purposes.
If you come up with a new health identifier and say it's only going to be used for health, there's nothing to stop the Congress 2 years later from saying, well, we're going to use it for health, and we're going to use it for welfare, and then we're going to use it for immigration, and then we're going to use it for everything else. And there simply aren't, there's no confidence that any kind of legal protections will remain in place over the long term.
While President Clinton's health care plan did not pass, the administration still claims to be committed to the program. It just says that changes will have to be implemented incrementally. Meanwhile, the momentum toward a national ID continues to grow.
The simple fact is this: once you have a national identifier number and an electronically based card, you have closed the only hole in the surveillance net. Your card with your unique identifier number will enable the government to tie all of its computer records together on you.
You can have distributed networks, distributed systems. You can have millions and millions and millions of computers. They all talk to each other. You can link information, you can share information, you can manipulate it, you can create profiles. It's absurd to talk about a data bank. The information is all over the world. It is in many, many different databases, and they can all talk to each other.
This is all invisible to people, and they have no idea that the pieces of their lives lie scattered in these different files. What's going on slowly is that there are more and more links being created between these records, and we're getting closer and closer to the notion of some kind of centralized dossier on people. We're not there yet, but that's where we're headed. Our
view is that a unique identifier not only isn't necessary in order to make a system like that work, it's extremely dangerous. That when you start to link very sensitive personal information with a unique identifier, then you run the risk of that number getting out, that you get security breaches both from outside the system and from within the system. The danger of a unique identifier is that it will be very easy to link disparate records.
How close are we to a national database? A database that contains information on every one of us. How close are we to the day when every one of our deeds is open to some faceless bureaucrat? The answer may surprise you. Congressman Neil Smith of Iowa's 4th District has revealed in a shocking report to the American public that Congress and the White House have already agreed to secretly fund a national identification center. This center, located just 4 hours from Washington, D.C. in Virginia, will enable law enforcement officials and intelligence agents to consolidate hundreds of millions of files on every single American. Visionaries in past decades have warned that Big Brother government is coming. Sophisticated technologies and advanced computers now allow the government to monitor the actions of every single one of us.
The center, we are told, will monitor citizens for compliance with gun control regulations. But according to the congressman, its use will expand beyond that purpose. The solution to screening people is to have a national center computerized so that local law enforcement offices can instantly access information from all states. We will continue to establish the National Identification Center for this and other law enforcement purposes. But what other purposes? Will this database record credit histories? How about criminal records or military service files? Or taken a step further in the hands of a future government, could such files record political affiliations or religious beliefs? Such questions remain unanswered. However, for the first time in history, we face a moment in time when the technology could make it possible.
Eroding freedoms, the gathering and compiling of data, the monitoring of the actions of every citizen. These are things that we normally associate with totalitarian governments or with the darkest days of the Soviet Empire. Could we be on the road to our own version of a police state? Are our personal freedoms or financial security at risk? Unfortunately, when you consider this carefully, the answer to both those questions may very well be yes. But you see, there's more to it than that. When you examine it carefully, you will see that within the United States and Canada, these are not isolated events. They are happening in every Western nation in the world today. I have studied these issues for years, looking for the common denominator, the common thread that runs through all of this. And what I have found is undeniable evidence that a common agenda is being followed in every major Western nation in the world today. Why? Because these governments have come to a realization that we have entered a global age. They recognize the need for governments and nations to come together, not as powerful central governments, but rather as part of an all-powerful central world government. If we want to understand any pieces of this puzzle, we must learn to understand the big picture. And that big picture is one of an all-powerful, all-encompassing central world authority in which the United States will play an ever smaller role.
Gary Kah is the author of En Route to Global Occupation. He understands how late in the game we are.
I have here in front of me a paid advertisement that was recently run by the WCPA in the March-April issue of Sojourners magazine. And in this article, they openly call for a world government, and they state, and I quote, "As of January 1995, more than 400 non-governmental organizations in 72 countries, comprising more than 15 million individual members, had joined the Global Ratification and Elections Network to work for ratification and implementation of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth."
In fact, the WCPA, the World Constitution and Parliament Association, with the full approval of these 72 nations, has already drafted a world constitution which would override the American Constitution.
Globalists for years have talked about the need for a constitutional convention to make the necessary changes in the U.S. Constitution to allow us to legally go into a world government. Or better yet, from their standpoint, to replace our Constitution completely with a brand new world Constitution. Something called the Philadelphia II Initiative is calling for a worldwide constitutional convention to introduce a world constitution for a world government. They're calling it Philadelphia II because the first time around in Philadelphia we received our U.S. Constitution. This is the second time around now, and it's going to be a world constitution for world government.
The sad part is that many publicly elected representatives sworn to defending the U.S. Constitution quietly support and are working toward this agenda.
You know, there was a time when an elected official in the United States government who has taken an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution could have gone to jail for treason, or maybe even have his life taken through the death penalty for treason by defying the Constitution and trying to overthrow that. And yet today we have a number of examples of current or former elected officials talking about world government rather openly, talking about the need for a world constitution to replace our U.S. Constitution, and they are actively working to bring this about.
At the heart of this drive toward a new world order is the Council on Foreign Relations. When asked about its powerful sister organization, the Trilateral Commission, CFR insider Winston Lord said, "The Trilateral Commission doesn't run the world, the Council on Foreign Relations does that." But what is this secretive group, and how much influence can an unelected men's club have?
Well, I think to come to a conclusion on how powerful they are, you would have to do a statistical analysis of just how many of our leaders have belonged to the Council on Foreign Relations. I did that a number of years ago, prior to the Clinton administration. We went back and looked at who held the top 5 positions in the U.S. government going back to around World War II. We took the presidency, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Advisor. And I added up all the people that had held those 5 positions. There were a total of 60. Of those 60 individuals, 48 of them were members of the Council on Foreign Relations. That's 80%. In the Clinton administration, until recently, it was 100%. Currently in the Clinton administration, there are just over 500 people from the Council on Foreign Relations who hold key positions.
In addition to the fact we have people out there, shadowy figures if you wish, who are controlling the financial destiny of this country, and we have no control over what they decide. They are international figures in many cases, or they're people who have vested interests other than what the vested interest of freedom that we have in this country.
No matter how well-intentioned the efforts of those to produce a new world order may be, when those efforts take place covertly and without our consent, the specter of conspiracy is raised. Equally troubling is the fact that at the core of the globalist agenda is their determination that North American freedoms, both political and economic, must be brought in line with that of our would-be global partners in the emerging New World Order. This will mean that our standard of living, as well as our expectation of freedom, must be decreased. This will bring us in line with the reality and principles of socialism.
In a socialist world, the right of private property is eroded. The state is king and the citizen is subject. Could it take place in America? Is this where we are being led? And how far down the road to a socialist world have we traveled? Recent examples are raising serious concerns. Take the case of Willie Jones. In February of 1991, Willie Jones was on his way to Houston to buy shrubs for his nursery business. It was simply another regular part of his regular routine.
Hello. Hi. I'd like a round trip to Houston, please.
We have a flight that leaves within 45 minutes.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, that'll be $260, please, sir.
Okay.
Do you have any baggage that needs to be checked?
No, I don't. There.
Thank you. Here you are. You'll be boarding to gate 5.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, security. I'd like to alert you to a man named Willie Jones. He just left a couple minutes ago. About 5'8", was wearing a black and white shirt, black jeans, runners. No, sir, he paid by cash. Yes, he is traveling alone. No, sir, he did not have any baggage.
As is the case in most American airports today, the fact that Willie paid for his airline ticket in cash was considered to be suspicious enough for the ticket agent to tip off federal agents. But the story doesn't end there.
Have a seat. What's your name?
Willie.
Let's see some ID, Willie. What else you got in there?
I've got money.
What kind of money?
$9,600.
$9,600. That's a lot of money. Let's have a look. You can buy a lot of things with that $9,600. Well, now, that's a lot of money. What are you doing with this kind of money?
I go down to the shrubberies and I buy
cash products, the farmers will only accept cash. That's it.
That's a lot of money to be walking around with, Will. Is that all you buy down there, Willie? Tell me the truth. Who are you giving this money to?
I'm giving it to the shrubberies.
What do you got in the bag?
I just got my belongings.
Let's have a look. Where's home, Willie?
New York.
Come here often?
Yes, I do.
Always carry $9,600 with you?
No, I told you, I gotta go down to the shrubberies. They take cash and only cash.
Tell me about the shrubberies, Willie.
Well, I have a nursery and I go down there, I pay for once, twice a year.
Is that all you buy?
No, that's just... Listen, I told you, I'm going down to buy shrubbery. That's all I can do. They take cash.
Give me a reason to believe you, Willie.
What am I gonna do?
You tell me. You ever been busted before?
No, I haven't.
Sit. There you go. That's all you get.
In testimony before the House Government Operations Subcommittee hearing on such forfeiture, it was found that Jones was not charged with any crime, that he had no criminal record, and that he made such trips regularly. Yet the committee heard how that Jones, after showing the evidence, was then forced to prove to authorities that he deserved the $9,600 that was taken from him back. Moreover, he had to post a 10% bond before the process of appeal could even begin. A lawyer close to the case noted that these procedures, introduced under the guise of fighting drug trafficking, allow the government to dispossess property owners based only on hearsay and innuendo evidence of insufficient reliability to be admissible in a court of law. Is this really an effort to crack down on criminals, or are law-abiding citizens and their properties now the targets of government agencies out of control? Consider the facts. An estimated 80% of the people whose property is seized by the government are never charged with a crime. Authorities often argue that the money can be tied to drugs because traces of cocaine can be found on the bills of the people whose property they seize. But the FBI has now admitted that 80% of the bills in circulation today are tainted by traces of drugs. A 7-year-long independent study by a private firm, Toxicology Consultants Incorporated, put the figure at 96%. This clearly puts every American at risk. Nonetheless, law enforcement agencies press ahead. In a written opinion for the Second U.S. Court of Appeals, Judge George C. Pratt wrote, "We continue to be enormously troubled by the government's increasing and unchecked use of civil forfeiture statutes and the disregard for due process."
There was a case in western New York in Batavia where a young fellow was practicing horticulture in a way not pleasing to the government. He was growing marijuana among the tomato plants. His mother owned the farm. She lived 40 miles away, but she lost the farm because that marijuana was on her property. And the judge said she should have known that her son was growing the marijuana plants. Now, even so, the fact that why should she pay such a heavy penalty for somebody else's crime?
These instances go to the core of our constitutional rights and more. This is about what can only be considered the theft of property. No trial, no conviction, simply suspicion. Big Brother is acting suspiciously, and many are beginning to ask why.
The crime bill that was passed in 1994, that was supposed to be such a broad thing, it has in it, in the rural drug enforcement section of it, a provision that if a person is under investigation, that the government can confiscate that person's property. It doesn't say anything about convictions. It doesn't even say anything about arresting that person. Just being under investigation and the property can be taken. Now, to me, that is a big violation of due process.
There is no better example of this than the case of Johnny Sotelo.
So, what seems to be the problem here? My jacket's overheated. Have you called your central dispatch yet?
Oh, not yet. It's only happened now.
Look, maybe we can help you get this rig on its way.
I think we might have something here. I want this back door open.
Come with me.
You know, I've seen a lot of drugs come in this country. Vehicles, exactly like this.
Heavy equipment buyer. Licensed. So where's your heavy equipment, boy? What's with the empty truck?
I go to the auction.
Uh-huh.
What you got in the bag? Told you we had a hot one. How much is in here?
I got 23,000.
As of right now, I'm confiscating this vehicle and all the cash under the grounds of suspicious behavior.
What do you mean suspicious?
I consider $23,000 in cash suspicious behavior.
I go to the auction.
There's ample evidence to suggest criminal behavior. Sorry, pal, you lose. Law's on our side.
The Johnny Sotelo story should send chills down the spine of every American. He was not arrested. He was never charged with a crime. For 2 years, he fought with the sheriff's office of Jefferson Davis Parish in Louisiana for the return of his $23,000.
There's way too many other interests involved. Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
Finally, under no legal pressure of any kind, the sheriff's office offered him a deal.
Okay, send him in.
The return of his truck and half the money.
I got your check
Sotelo
right here.
accepted, and the sheriff's office pocketed $11,500.
What does all this mean? When we examine all the pieces of this puzzle, a very threatening picture emerges. The monitoring, tracking, and surveillance of citizens is growing at an alarming rate. National databases and a universal identity card are under development. And now, government agencies are routinely confiscating property of law-abiding citizens every week. Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it. In light of the evidence that we have examined here, there is a disturbing pattern of evidence of growing government intrusiveness on our traditional rights and freedoms. The tragic history of this century of Nazi Germany, of Communist China and Russia has shown that this has led step by step to the development of a police state. And if history repeats itself, we will witness a growing attack on the citizen's ability to defend himself against these intrusions. The history of this century shows that virtually every dictatorship first limited the citizen's ability to defend himself by disarming the citizens before imposing a police state.
If guns are taken away from the people, it eliminates any chance, even a remote possibility of an armed revolt should a dictatorial government arise, such as was the case in Nazi Germany. I believe all the talk about gun control to get guns away from the people because of the crime doesn't hold a lot of water. The states with the highest per capita guns have the lowest crime rate. That is a fact. Montana and North Dakota have very low crime. Whereas in Washington, D.C., where guns have been outlawed, it has one of the highest crime rates in the country, and people still illegally get guns. So criminals are always going to somehow get hold of guns.
The only people that would be affected by a tightening of gun control laws or a crackdown are the honest people who aren't a problem to begin with. The criminal are going to get guns anyway. Well, we'll put it this way. If bans were successful, prohibition would have been the legislative success of the 20th century, and we wouldn't have a drug problem. But bans are not the answer. Those who want to get drugs or guns or alcohol and wish to abuse them are going to do it anyway.
What is never mentioned in any of the anti-gun tirades are the number of crimes that are stopped because law-abiding citizens have the ability to protect themselves. Since the bombing in Oklahoma, gun control issues and the existence of militia groups throughout the country have come to the forefront. Many in the media and in anti-gun circles within the current administration are touting the Oklahoma City bombing as proof positive that weapons have to be confiscated and militia groups disbanded. Yet while this call goes forth over the airwaves, there is scarcely a mention of where the ideas of militias and a strong citizenry come from. The Second Amendment to the Constitution.
I think it's a cornerstone of freedom and liberty because of the fact that our founding fathers put the Second Amendment into the Constitution where they did, right after the freedom of speech, right of assembly, right of petition, right of the free press and so forth. It's a freedom issue because it was put there, if you will, to keep the government honest.
This was very important to the Founding Fathers. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said, if that right is ever being threatened, that people should be vigilant and to take a stand and to defend that right, because that would be the final sign that our rights and freedoms are about to be taken from us.
This is an area where rights of the people are being eroded to make a stronger central government, which is exactly the opposite of what our Founding Fathers asked for, and what I think is probably counterproductive to a true democracy, or a republic as we have it in the United States.
Everyone agrees that crime is a serious problem today. The nightly newscasts detail the horrors. Yet every major study has found that criminals would get guns regardless of the legal barriers. Then the country would be faced with only the criminals and the government having guns. Honest citizens would be at their mercy. George Washington foresaw this day when America would hang in the balance. He warned the people who would inherit the land. Firearms stand next in importance to the Constitution itself. They are the American people's liberty, teeth, and keystone under independence. To ensure peace, security, and happiness, the rifle and the pistol are equally indispensable. The very atmosphere of firearms everywhere restrains evil interference. Unfortunately, were Washington alive today, he would see a nation falling into the very trap that he and the other founding fathers sought to avoid. A populace with no means to resist.
In light of the issues we have examined, I'm sure you'll agree that we are living in dangerous times. Our personal freedoms, our privacy, and our private property are under attack by government authorities. Groups with hidden agendas now threaten our national sovereignty and Constitution as they push us towards their coming world government. Yet as I sit here today, I am not afraid of the future. That's because I'm a Christian as well as a researcher and author. During my years of research, I've discovered something even more dramatic than the dangerous developments I've shared with you today. Careful research shows that these developments, including computer tracking systems and this New World Order, were foretold by the ancient prophets of the Bible thousands of years ago. The Bible reveals these fulfillments of prophecy are a final warning to the world about the coming worldwide dictatorship and the climactic world crisis that lies ahead. However, these same prophets tell us that those who have a personal faith in Jesus Christ can hope that we are approaching the greatest moment in history, the return of Jesus Christ as the promised Messiah to set up His kingdom on earth. The next few years will witness growing attacks on our freedom and liberty. It is vital that we as citizens speak up to defend our liberties that our forefathers fought to maintain. However, this battle is ultimately a spiritual battle for the soul of our nation. Those who have a strong personal faith in Jesus Christ can understand the true significance of these fulfillments of prophecy in our generation. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ warned, when these things, these prophecies, begin to come to pass, look up, because your redemption draws nigh.